China and the West, Heading Towards Different Modernities? By Bao Pu. Reviewed. 1. Tao Te Ching, The Classic Book of Integrity and the Way, by Victor H. Mair, Bantam Books. 2. Laozi Ancient and Modern, by Liu Xiaogan, China Social Sciences Press. Note, Dao De Jing, Tao Te Ching and Laozi all refer to the same thing, the Chinese ancient text by Laozi. Tao and Dao are different transliterations of the same concept. Two respected scholars of the ancient Chinese classic Dao De Jing were born within 4 years of each other and died within 2 days of each other in the last week, June 2026. One was American, the other Chinese. Victor Henry Mair, an American sinologist and professor of Chinese at the University of Pennsylvania, was born in 1943 and died on June 28. Liu Xiaogan, a professor of Daoist philosophy at Beijing Normal University, was born in 1947 and died on June 30. Each had made significant breakthroughs within his intellectual tradition, and each was well known within their scholarly communities. The quiet public reactions to their deaths in both countries is a reflection of the broader public's limited awareness of their specialized fields. Yet this relative silence points to a precarious condition shared by their respective countries. While the threat of a catastrophic and world-changing armed conflict between them looms, cultural and civilizational exchange takes place largely in obscurity. The apparent similarity in the final moments of their careers disguises a deeper and increasingly urgent problem, one that has become a major source of international anxiety. The idea of multiple modernities, proposed with renewed force at the turn of the 21st century, does appear to describe a real emerging condition. Contemporary China is increasingly showing signs that its idea of modernity differs profoundly from that of the West. As scholars of the same generation, Mair and Liu offer a revealing illustration of how modernization could progress along separate intellectual paths, even when those paths overlapped around the same ancient text. The point of convergence in their scholarly lives may be traced back to 1972. That year, President Richard Nixon visited the People's Republic of China and met Mao Zedong, marking the beginning of Sino-American rapprochement in the midst of the Cold War. In the United States, a New Age rendition of the Tao Te Ching appeared on the Christmas gift list of Time magazine, signaling the ancient Chinese text's emergence as a durable element of Western popular spirituality. In China that same year, archaeologists opened the Mawangui tombs, which belonged to an aristocratic family of the early Western Han Dynasty, 206 BCE and 9 CE. As the excavation continued over the following months, tomb number 3 was found to contain 2 silk manuscripts of the Dao De Jing, the Mawangui silk manuscripts known as Manuscript A and Manuscript B dating to approximately 168 BCE. These manuscripts were at least 5 centuries older than the commonly transmitted versions of the text. In 1972, neither Mair nor Liu's intellectual path had taken definitive shape. The photographic plates of the 2 restored silk manuscripts, together with full textual transcriptions, were first made available to scholars and the wider public in monographic form in 1976. At the time, Mair was pursuing Chinese studies at Harvard and completed his PhD that year. Liu's scholarly path was delayed more profoundly by historical circumstance. Being a native Chinese scholar in the latter half of the 20th century did not necessarily bring him closer to the ancient Chinese text. On the contrary, Liu received his basic education during the time when traditional culture was condemned and classical texts were largely erased from formal educational programs. By the time Liu came of age, few in the population could read classical texts without the aid of vernacular translations. Only in 1978, when graduate admissions resumed after the Cultural Revolution, was Liu admitted to the Department of Philosophy at Peking University. He received his M.A. in philosophy in 1981. In 1980, a much more refined and authoritative edition of the Mawangui silk manuscripts was finally published. By the time Mair decided to translate Dao De Jing, he was fully aware of the almost insurmountable difficulty, the deceptive brevity of the text, the density of its language, and the seemingly inexhaustible possibilities of interpretation. For 2 decades, he had vowed that he would never attempt to translate the Tao Te Ching. Yet the newly discovered Mawangui manuscripts changed his mind. They made it possible, he believed, to produce a totally new translation of the Tao Te Ching far more accurate and reliable than any published previously. His translation appeared in 1990, 3 years before Liu received his PhD in philosophy from Peking University in 1993. Liu subsequently became one of the most respected specialists in Daoist thought. Since the 2nd century AD, there have been a staggering number of works devoted to the Dao De Jing, commentaries and sub-commentaries that reinterpret the classic text and explain previous commentaries. Mair referred to the number as being more than 1,500. Following his predecessor British sinologist Arthur Waley, 1889–1966, Mair treated these variations as obstacles to the true meaning of the original text. According to Waley in 1934, all the commentaries, from Wang Pai's, ca. 240 to 249 AD, onwards down to the 18th century, are scriptural. That is to say that each commentator reinterprets the text according to his own particular tenets, without any intention or desire to discover what it meant originally. From my point of view, they are therefore useless. By using the earliest known manuscripts for translation, Mair thought it possible to strip away the distortions and obfuscations of a tradition that has striven for 2 millennia to improve the text with commentaries and interpretations more amenable to various religious, philosophical, and political persuasions. This view of the historical accumulation and textual variation of the Dao De Jing essentially marked the point at which Mair's approach diverged from Liu Xiaogan's. By the time Liu undertook his mature research on the text, an even earlier version had come to light, the Guodian Laozi on bamboo slips, unearthed in 1993 and generally dated to around 300 BCE. Its script is archaic, its contents amount to only about 2/5 of the most circulated text, and its chapter order differs substantially from the standard version. Liu was the first to compare, word by word, 5 of the most important versions, beginning with the earliest bamboo slip version. He then examined selected cases of textual variation in order to determine the nature of the text's historical evolution. Finally, and importantly, he offered his own interpretation through the lens of modern philosophical training, largely in conversation with the Western intellectual tradition. Despite these different approaches, both scholars arrived at valuable insights. Mair was not the first to propose that the Dao De Jing had an oral prehistory before it became a relatively solidified written text. He was, however, one of the most forceful modern English language advocates of that view. He made the argument persuasive by drawing attention to repetition, rhyme, formulaic phrasing, and homophonic patterns within the text. Possibly influenced by Western scholarship on the oral traditions behind Homer's Iliad and Odyssey. Such a comparative perspective certainly enriches Chinese understanding of the pretextual history of the Laozi, a crucial but still underexplored field. This is especially significant given the deep Chinese reverence for the written word, expressed in the classical phrase "writing carries the Tao." On the question of meaning, Liu Xiaogan made a breakthrough of his own. Through textual comparison, Liu sought to explain why the Laozi evolved as it did. In doing so, he confirmed, by modern empirical methods, something that traditional Chinese scholars have long implicitly understood and that 20th century scholars such as Yu Yingxi described in currently comprehensible terms. The reason classics remain ever fresh through the ages lies precisely in the fact that they offer different illuminations to readers of different periods, and even to different readers within the same period. But this does not mean that the interpretation of classics is entirely without objectivity, or that one may say whatever one pleases on a whim. 2. This distinction may be understood as the difference between meaning and significance. 3. The objectivity contained in the text belongs to its original meaning, the level of meaning that translators such as Arthur Waley and Victor Mair sought to recover through philological analysis. The Chinese classic, or Jing, however, was never meant to be merely a fixed verbal object. It was a text designed to generate new insights with changing historical circumstances, allowing readers to engage it through the knowledge, experience, and concerns of their own age. Such contemporary insights may be called its significance. Mair himself was deeply absorbed in the problem of meaning and indulged on the insight he gained. In preparing his translation, he wrote that he spent 2 full months searching for a satisfactory English equivalent for de. He finally chose integrity rather than virtue, because he wanted a word broader in scope and less narrowly moralistic in implication. Liu, by contrast, was not shy to discuss the contemporary significance of the text. In his work, democracy appears in connection with Chapter 49, science with chapters 40 and 47, and feminism with Chapter 6, among other examples. By the time Mair published his translation in 1990, the Tao Te Ching had already appeared in well over 100 English renditions. Since then, the number of English versions has continued to grow, with broad public lists now recording more than 175 renderings of the first chapter alone, for there are many readers and scholars in the West who have gained true insights from Laozi. Yet how such knowledge might be used, if at all, in the service of broader strategic interests remains unclear. As we now understand it, Dao De Jing has been the foundational text of Chinese civilization, a living cultural project throughout its history. In China, the total number of studies of the Dao De Jing has been estimated at approximately 3,700 works by 2025. Since the publication of the Muangui Silk texts, an enormous number of annotated translations, specialized studies, and popular interpretations have appeared, far exceeding the total output of all previous eras combined. Although the general public remains largely unaware of developments in this specialized field, it is possible that some readers have already begun to apply insights drawn from Laozi to new domains such as artificial intelligence, management, and commercial strategy. The breakthroughs that Mair and Liu brought to the Dao De Jing were therefore significant, each in their own way. Their parallel lives reveal more than a shared scholarly interest in an ancient classic. Their influence unfolded quietly within two separate intellectual traditions, the West and China. Together, they illuminate two distinct modern engagements with the Chinese classics, and perhaps also the increasingly consequential divergence between two modern worlds.